I now call to order the February 11th, 2025 Board of Trustees meeting, time being 6:30 PM. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, may I get a roll call, please?
Trustee Cannon. Trustee Daly.
Present.
Trustee Moyer. Trustee Teets.
Here.
Trustee Wiegand.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mason.
Here.
Mayor Shosse.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda this evening? Any conflicts of interest with the agenda? All right, now it's time for public comment. Members of the public wishing to speak will be in non-agenda items. You'll be given 3 minutes and then just state your name for the record. First off, we're going to have a presentation. Mr. Bob Gowing, our Public Works Director, and Gina Fox from the Colorado Department of Transportation will present on this item.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. So we're going to tag team this presentation tonight. I'm just going to real briefly kind of go through the history of what's gone on out here at this crazy intersection. I think instead of just kind of reading through the memo, well, I'll just real quickly scan through it. So back in 2018 or so, PSD kind of showed up and said, hey, we're going to build a school over here. And kind of knowing that that would potentially create some traffic concerns, especially there at the curve, those acute intersections. We asked for a little bit of a beefed up TIS from them, which they gave us. And that TIS did not result in a recommendation for any improvements to those two intersections. So at that point, we kind of moved on, and Director Byrd back there managed to get, well, we appropriated actually that $70,000 to hire a planner, a transportation planning firm, to give us some alternatives for that. And that was Felsberg, Holton, Ullvig. I think you guys have probably seen that study a few times, and that study recommended the construction of a roundabout at the intersection of 62E and County Road 9. And with no real clear, I think, idea of what would happen to the curve. It might need to stay there as a flyby, but in general, the idea was to take the curve out and put a roundabout in back then. Kind of moving forward to 2020 or so, we landed a $710,000 CMAQ grant for this same intersection. Roundabouts are good for air quality, so that scored us enough points to get that grant. We kind of embarked on design, and about that same time, we were looking at getting the various grants for the RMS project, the Cleveland Avenue Improvements Project, and that was the RMS grant itself, the MMOF, and the HSIP grants that we got. And through the discussions happened at the Upper Front Range TPR, we ended up giving back the CMAQ money basically in exchange for the $4.4 million that we got for Cleveland. So just kind of part of the typical things that happen when you're arranging for transportation funding. And at that same time, we had already kind of been talking about CDOT, and they were expressed some interest in taking the project on, which they subsequently did. So in 2023, they initiated their design efforts for the intersection. And when I say the intersection, I mean all three corners, right? County Road 9 at 62E, and 62E and County Road 9 at Highway 1. So they've been in that process for a little while. And with me is Gina Fox, a professional engineer with Region 4, and there's some other CDOT staff back there as well. And she's going to run you through what they've done since then.
And if I share, can I share my screen so you can see a presentation? That way you'll have some more graphical images.
Gina, if you can accept that request to become a panelist, you'll be able to share your screen.
Says rejoining. Is it full screen now? No. Come on. There we go. Oh, it's delayed. There we go. Okay. So thank you. Thanks, Bob. That's a great introduction. So I am Gina Fox. I'm the resident engineer over this project. And so tonight I'm just going to build on from what Bob just told you and then talk about our project goals, show the location of where this is kind of morphed into, and then discuss the funding and what we've spent so far and where we're planning to go. So with that said, Bob just gave pretty much everything up to about where I'm starting this little timeline here. So the intersection study, the traffic study that was done for the curve, and then the leg of 62E and County Road 9. And then what that did was, he spoke about Upper Front Range. What that did was it placed that as a priority project on Upper Front Range. And then on top of that, CDOT comes through and we have our list of projects that are priority projects. And we define what those are. And both of these were on the same list. And then so in 2022, our 10-year plan list, which is this list of projects that gets defined by, mayors have a say when they speak to their individuals who then talk to Upper Front Range, and all these projects get on these priorities. And then CDOT's 10-year priority project list actually got funding by our Transportation Commission back in 2022, which it didn't fund 100% of all the projects. It funded a portion of all the projects statewide, so not just this region, which gave us $4 million of funding for this project. And so with that, it also identified some of the project goals, which were safety improvements on State Highway 1, so the accesses off of 9 and 62E, and then continuing coordination with our local officials, so that way if grants are needed or anything, we are positioning ourselves in a way that we can get those funds. And so then that kind of brings us into 2022 when we really do kick off the project. We start going through, we update the traffic numbers, and then started doing some engineering layouts. And one thing we found was as we were laying this out, my supervisor calls it the devil's in the details, but it is true. We have this high pressure coolant line, so that actually started to show us that, actually it's more affordable if we do a signalized intersection. So then we started laying out a signalized intersection, and we didn't have it extended over the $4 million. So the more we started looking at, and then it also didn't warrant a signal. So then we had to do a warrant analysis, and CDOT has the funds to put in a signal once every about 2 years. And so this intersection, we figured it would warrant a signal since there's a school right there, but it did not. So then that killed the signal. So we went back to the roundabout, which we already knew we didn't have funding for. And so we got creative with a smaller roundabout, but then our geotech report finally finished, and it showed you can't put all the state highway traffic on these county roads. You're going to have to reconstruct the whole roadway section. And so now this project just escalated in price. So all of County Road 9, all of County Road 62E would have to be completely ripped up from the subgrade and start all over. And so that's well above $4 million just to do that. So then we went back and we again revisited that scope of what are our current goals, what can we do with this funding. And so I'll show you guys some layouts of where we're at today with that. And so we're hoping to have final design for some of that work by May, and then hoping to go into construction. We'll have utility agreements and clearances, environmental clearances, utilities, and right-of-way. And then hopefully we can do construction in the winter when the ditch is turned off, North Peter irrigation ditch is turned off, and then do some of the rest of the asphalt work once it gets warm enough. And so once that starts, it'll be about a 2-month construction period, maybe 3. But this is how we are looking at this project. Right now, in the green is what we're focusing on at the moment. We will do some signing and striping at the access off 62E and 1, but we are looking to, anything we're doing right now will not be throwaway in the future. That's the goal. So anything we lay, anything we widen, it's not going to be throwaway on the red and blue phase of this project. And so we heard, and we also have crash data out at 62 Jefferson Avenue and State Highway 1. A lot of people going southbound on 1. We're seeing more accidents occurring there, so we'll be adding a left turn there. And then the other, it's a sight distance hazard. People going south on 9 to get onto 1, they have to turn like this. And so instead, we're going to give them an acceleration lane so that they can merge in a safer distance. Eventually, we do recognize that, yes, less intersections has a statistically favorable lesser crash rate. So eventually, yes, we do see the curve of State Highway 1 going away, but that's going to be around, at least in today's dollars, that's going to be about a $10 million project to realign State Highway 1. So that is a future project, I believe. I know Upper Front Range is redoing their priority list or has finished redoing it. CDOT's going through the process of updating our 10-year project list. So that'll be coming soon. So we'll know more as that comes out. And then what that does is it positions us better for grants. If these are priority projects, then we are better positioned to win grant funding, especially with the safety concerns out here. And so here's a picture. So now getting into the project location, what we're going to fix today, we'll do some signing and striping corrections up at 62E and State Highway 1. And then down at County Road 9 and State Highway 1, we are going to add an acceleration lane and a left turn lane onto Jefferson. So this is, oh, dang it, it's too difficult to see. But this is the new striping configuration out at, so now we're rotated, north is pointing left. And so that's that acceleration lane and then the left turn lane. And then this is just that ultimate configuration. If it were to happen, this would be likely what a signalized intersection would look like with the curve removed. And then this would be a larger roundabout with the curve removed as well. And so there is some play still in that design. That was pretty preliminary. We didn't go down the rabbit hole too far on that. We did get a good idea of our limits and our impacts, enough to know, okay, yeah, if we move it here, then we're going to touch that pond. If we move it here, then we could touch the church. And so we did go down that. So just to make sure what is the most cost-effective option out here. And so then I do want to talk to you guys about budget. I'll end on this, but this is a big slide. So like I stated, we did update the traffic and engineering, and that took about $80,000. But again, that's not throwaway because it projected out through 2050. And it has updated school counts, and we did get peak counts as well for the school. And then we just updated it again recently in November. So that'll hold for at least a couple years before having to be updated. And then survey, we have all of the survey. Our CDOT crew went out and did a bunch of in-house survey, and then subsurface utilities, and that cost about $180,000. But none of that's throwaway. That's all really good information right there, especially the subsurface utilities. Those are usually the costlier investigations because they have to pothole. And then geotechnical, that'll last for a really long time, and we can share that information. We have shared information, but that's helpful to anyone in the area, especially if you have development coming in, then they can know what the soils are in the area. Engineering design, that's that's about everything, even through the May, is gonna be about 250,000 now at this point. And so, I mean, that's roadway drainage, all the environmental utilities, right of way, that's everything, beyond engineering. And then the last thing is the construction estimate. It's, I don't know that it'll be $2 million. I think it'll be a little bit less, but roughly $2 million. And so if you do add all that up, it's not 4 million. And so what are we gonna do with that leftover dollars? So our plan right now is to write an IGA with Larimer County and Wellington and hand over the remaining funds to put forward to anything that you guys are wanting to pursue in the area as well. So that could be sidewalk or a grant match or something. But yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Trustee Wiegand? Okay. Trustee Daly?
I'm sure I understood this, but the green is the $2 million. That's what we're discussing right now. This portion?
Well, and the blue had all the preliminary engineering.
Okay, so
So,
engineering for
mhm.
all of the above.
All the red, blue, and green has all the preliminary engineering.
Okay, and then the actual construction costs of green
Yes.
and striping and
Mhm.
all the things. Okay,
Mhm.
thank you
Yes.
very much. My first question was going to be, what about the rest of the $4 million? So thank you for answering that in
Okay.
advance. I do appreciate that effort for sure. Very much appreciated. Thank you.
Trustee Teets?
Thank you for this. I know all of the engineering will prove beneficial in the future, so it's nice to have this, and it's great when we see some of those tax dollars returning to Wellington, to be able to be utilized here throughout the county. I guess my question then comes in is, if we're only doing these, the minor updates now, what is a projected plan for CDOT in the future for discussing a roundabout, signaling, items like that? Is it in a plan at this point?
So as far as these are in our 10-year plan, but to realign State Highway 1 is not technically defined in that 10-year plan today. So if Upper Front Range identifies it as a priority, Town of Wellington helps them identify that as a priority, then yes, if it's on a priority project list, that'll certainly help. And then we'll all have to work together to get it officially built, funded completely, but yes. When does the 10-year plan update happen? When is it finalized though? Is it May? June? It's coming up, June.
So send
we'll know.
emails now.
Yes, be active right now, especially in this Upper Front Range priority project list, please. Yes.
That's my only question.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Fox. It's nice to see some progress here. Obviously, the intersection there at LCR 9 and 62E is of great concern to our residents, especially as far as the school there goes. I guess I would just and continue to say something that I've said for quite a long time now, which is, as far as advocating for our agricultural community, I just want to be sure that whatever ultimate configuration we end up with is large enough to fit some of the larger farm equipment around that. I don't know if a smaller roundabout will fit that need, but I just want to make sure that that is heard on the CDOT side so that that is appropriately considered. Otherwise, like I said, really appreciate the status update on this. I know it's been a long time in the works. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And one thing to note is CDOT design standards. We have to design to one of the largest vehicles out there. I have personally taken, we have to model it now. We don't just have tables anymore. You have to physically model these things. And so I have actually built what I've heard is the largest combine out here into the software, and then I've taken it around some of these roundabouts just to make sure it does work. So that is one thing. We do consider that. Yes, it makes it a more expensive roundabout than a typical local agency street would build, But if it's gonna be a state highway, it's gonna have to be big, usually, typically, so.
Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. Good information for us and give us something to look forward to when this project comes to fruition. And I really like the fact that we'll do an IGA and get that money back to be able to utilize as we see fit, hopefully get future grants, work on the overpass, something of that nature. So thank you very much for everything and all the work you put into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will give an update on the overpass real quick since I'm here.
Perfect.
Oh, no, I didn't disconnect. Or do I need to log back in? My computer's just really slow. I can
still
try.
have you on there.
Okay, I can. We are conducting a study up at State Highway 1 and I-25 to try to position us again for grants. Please try to make this a priority project as well. And right now it's a traffic and safety study. And so we are focusing a lot of our efforts on safety, the aging infrastructure of the bridge, anything like that will certainly help us if you guys keep this a priority as well on that priority list. But we are moving that forward to try to position us for grant funds as well on the CDOT side.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Any
Mhm.
projection on how long it's gonna take?
To get the funding?
To get the funding to even look at starting the project over here? Are we looking at a 5-year time, 10-year time, or?
I
any-
think
anything
it'll
else?
depend on if it's on our 10-year plan list, on Upper Front Range priority project list. But it's one we hear about a lot. So I
Yes.
don't know that I can just throw out 5 years or 10 years, but I would say I think it's coming.
It's moving up.
I do.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the draft housing needs and affordability assessment presentation from Mr. Byrd, Planning Director, and Dr. Christensen Caron? Caron, with Matrix Design Group, and they'll present on this item together.
Thank you, Mayor. Cody Byrd, Planning Director. And not on your agenda, Laney Corey with Matrix Design Group is presenting with us as well. And because of the inclement weather, I said that remote attendance would be fine, so they're joining us via the Zoom call. Perfect. So I want to kick things off with kind of, those were some introductions. I have a few things I want to share too before Christian jumps into his presentation. We are considering a housing needs assessment, and this is for housing affordability. This assessment is looking at Wellington at a high level view. It's looking at all of our existing housing stock or housing inventory, our socioeconomic profile of our residents, what can residents afford, what are their income levels, and it's looking at the future needs for housing. How many units do we currently have? How many are expected to need based on our housing population projections, and what's the gap there? So we're looking at gap in a couple different ways. How many houses do we need? How many of those houses need to be at what affordable income levels to meet the resident population needs? So this is a really dense read. I appreciate that all of you spent some time going through 80+ pages of information. Christian's gonna boil that down a little bit in his presentation tonight to give you kind of the highlights to help you pull out those key elements. It's all important information, but we've tried to condense it to something that's a little more tangible for tonight. And in that report, this is a draft report. It's not finalized yet, but we expect that it will be soon after we get some feedback and direction from the board. In this draft report, it also includes some strategies that the town can employ to help create more opportunities for housing affordability within the community and to help meet those income level needs to fill those gaps. The strategies look at different regulatory policies that we can change in our land use code. It looks at different financial incentives or funding opportunities to pursue or supplement to help achieve affordable housing goals, and timelines, review strategies, and other things. So there's a lot of different elements included in that package. Housing affordability, no doubt you've all heard about it. It's not the type of project that's one and done and you move on. It's going to take a lot of different strategies. It's going to take a lot of time to start chipping away at this project or at this, housing affordability need. And so you're going to get to hear a lot about it over a long period of time. There's no silver bullet out there, so we're not looking at it that way. We're looking at long-term comprehensive strategies to help change the current outlook on housing affordability. A couple of things I wanted to highlight. I know this board has discussed it at its strategic planning retreat, the importance of housing affordability, and in fact adopted that as one of your strategic goals for the community, to grow responsibly by improving housing diversity and exploring financing options for affordable development, as well as fostering economic vibrancy for recruiting new businesses. We know that housing affordability is a key pillar of economic workforce. If the employees can't afford to live there, then the businesses don't come because their employees have no place to stay. So these are critical considerations for the town, and we're taking this very seriously, but we know it's going to take some time. I also highlighted some of the comprehensive plan goals on the same subject, and I wanted to highlight a couple of those. The comprehensive plan identified a goal for ensuring that existing and future residential development contributes to enhancing quality of life by allowing a greater mix of housing types and styles, encompassing all, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but encompassing all residents and income levels and accessibility needs. A goal to support Housing Catalyst, which is the Affordable Housing Authority. I'm sorry, too many A's. The Housing Authority. And to identify incentives to encourage new housing developments and retrofits for energy efficiency, water-wise materials, to make sure that homes are both affordable and cost comparable. So we know this is going to be a recurring theme throughout the work that we do here. This is kind of the first big step in identifying what those needs are and how we can start to make progress on them. A couple minor housekeeping issues. There's a lot of information in your packet, and we're going to give you highlights on that tonight. It's really easy to think about some of these from a very personal standpoint. We know that we're all residents of Wellington here at this board. It's easy to start thinking about some of these topics in terms of what does my housing scenario look like. And I would encourage you, if you're considering those examples, it's good to put things in context, but remember that not a one of us represents the community as a whole. So try to keep that level thinking at a high level, because we know that we've got a diverse resident population with varying needs. A lot of the data that we look at is based on averages or medians. And so that's how you'll see a lot of it framed. We know that there's highs and lows within each of those categories. And tonight's a high level overview. We're happy to answer questions as we go. We know there'll be more questions. If those come up, please send those to town staff. We'll get back to you, or we'll consider that in the future steps as we kind of move things forward. So those are my high level highlights at this point. Oh, one last thing. There is a handout in front of you tonight. There's 2 pages. One of them's front and back. All of that information is in this report. What we did is we tried to pull out some of those charts and put them all in one place just for ease of reference. So Christian may reference those handouts for you in his presentation here tonight. So I'm going to hand it over. Christian, if you would like to unmute yourself and proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so I think Cody just gave a great summary of the project. I also want to thank you for the opportunity to present via Zoom, given the snow that I believe has just begun out here in Denver. So before we get started, since this is our first time presenting before this body, I just wanted to briefly introduce ourselves. So we're part of a firm called Matrix Design Group. We're a Colorado-based multi-phase multidisciplinary firm specializing in community planning, in economic analysis, and consulting more broadly. We conduct housing needs assessments throughout the US with a particular focus on Colorado and Arizona. As far as my background, I am the senior research analyst here at Matrix. For this project, I have been serving as the project manager. I've been with the firm for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I earned a PhD in political science from UNC Chapel Hill, where I specialized in state and local government as well as public policy. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Lainey, to say a few words about herself.
Good evening, Mayor, Board of Trustees. My name is Lainey Corey. I am a senior planner with Matrix Design Group. I have been working with Christian and the planning team throughout this process really to help identify a lot of housing strategies. And so professionally, I've been with Matrix for about 2 years now. And prior to that, I was a public sector planner. This evening, I'm actually calling in from Arizona. And so it's great to be here with you all virtually. Thanks, Christian.
All right, so in terms of the agenda for tonight, I want to begin by just giving a brief overview of some of the major findings from the housing needs assessment. As you'll see, we take a very data-driven approach, right, to these sorts of projects. But at the same time, we recognize, right, that no one data source is perfect. So we really place a lot of emphasis on sort of getting feedback from the community. And we'll talk a little bit about that process as well, and some of the findings that came from it. And lastly, we are going to give an overview of some of the strategies that we think, based on our experience doing this work throughout the country, can help to move the needle in terms of meeting your housing needs. All right, so this is really a recap of some of what I think are the core findings from the housing needs assessment. And as Cody mentioned, there is a 2-page fact sheet that provides a bit more context here. But one thing that jumped out to me, as I began working on this is median household income in Wellington, per the most recent version of the American Community Survey, is over $101,000. Yet at the same time, the poverty rate is 7.4%. And for context, for a family of 4, the poverty line is less than $30,000. So the fact that median household income is relatively high, yet there's a high poverty rate, what that seems to suggest is that there is substantial income inequality, right? Where there are a significant percentage of households right at the bottom of the income spectrum for whom it can be really difficult to secure affordable housing. The home ownership rate in Wellington is 84%, higher than a lot of the other communities that we've studied in the past. And this is, you know, a direct reflection of the composition of your housing stock, right? When your housing stock is overwhelmingly single family detached homes, as is the case in Wellington, most people are going to own rather than rent. Next, using data from the county assessor's office, what we found is that for the median home in Wellington, it was built in 2007, which suggests that the housing stock is relatively new, right? And that's also just a sign of the fact that the town has experienced such dramatic growth, right, over the past 15 or 20 years. Next, in terms of some of the challenges that you all face, so you have about 2% of households that are considered overcrowded. Now that's actually a fairly good news story, right? There are a lot of communities that we've looked at where that rate is much higher. And in terms of what an overcrowded household is defined as per the US Census, what it essentially means is that there are more than one person per room in the housing unit. And that's only the case in about 2% of households in Wellington. Yeah, in terms of cost burden, so for I think what I should start by doing is defining what it means to be cost burdened, right? So so HUD has historically said that a household is cost burdened if it spends more than 30% of household income on total housing costs, right? And that doesn't just include, you know, base rent or the mortgage. That is intended to account for costs like utilities, property taxes, HOA fees, home owners insurance, right? What we found by looking at the most recent data from the ACS is, you know, over 40% of renters are cost burdened, and as you can see on the fact sheet, most of those renters are considered severely cost burdened. So what does that mean? That means that they're spending more than half of their incomes to cover gross rent. Homeowners with mortgages, they're doing a little bit better, right? Which is not too surprising given that, right, mortgage payments are not as responsive to market conditions as rents, right? And it's also the case, of course, that homeowners, their incomes tend to be higher. It's not always the case. Now, in terms of, so the statistics that I just presented for the most part came from the most recent version of the American Community Survey, which covers the period from 2018 to 2022. Obviously, market conditions have changed quite drastically since then. So we made sure to supplement those data with more recent data on the for sale and rental markets. And what we found is that median rent in Wellington, as of now, we pulled these data back in August of 2024, is about $2,400, right? And once you account for the high cost of utilities in Wellington, what that means is that a family effectively needs to earn $114,000, right, to afford the typical rental. And we know from, the first bullet point that the typical household is earning less than that. In terms of the for sale market, the median home in Wellington sells for around $480,000. The general rule from HUD is that in order for a for sale unit to be affordable, it should be no more, the sales price should represent no more than 3 times the income for the household. So that means that a family for the typical whole home in Wellington really needs to be earning around $160,000. And of course, what that means is that price point is just far out of reach for the median prospective home buyer. Now here's where things get a little more complicated. What we aim to do here is to identify the shortages by income level. This household column, these are essentially the cumulative number of households at an income tier, right? So in Wellington, as per the most recent data from the ACS, there are close to 140 renters who earn less than 50% of median income, right? So they're earning, and this is a ballpark, between $50,000 and $60,000. Yet, when the data were collected, there were 0 housing units actually that were affordable in Wellington to this income level. So what that means is there's a gap, right? There's a shortage of 139 units at the below 50% AMI level. The rental market, as you'll see in Wellington, is oriented toward really middle to higher income earners. Now, in terms of for sale housing, the way that this analysis works is in the household columns, you have households sorted by income level, right? Which, and in the housing unit column, housing units were categorized according to their current market values, right? So the way of looking at this is, right, how many households would be able to afford their current homes if they were purchased at today's market values. And what you will see is if, Wellington's homeowners suddenly were searching for homes in today's market, there would just be a huge shortage of homes at the below 80% AMI level. So at really that moderate and of course at the lower income ranges. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the community engagement campaign that we conducted as part of this project. We recently finalized our interviews with stakeholders. We engaged about a dozen of them, folks from the development and builder space. We talked to realtors. We also talked to folks in the nonprofit world, really sought to engage a wide array of voices here. And second, we provided materials for the town to conduct a couple of pop-up community events where residents, and I believe Cody has the results of those on display here tonight, where, you know, residents were asked to identify that they were presented with a series of options and asked to identify, you know, which housing types they think might work in Wellington. And finally, we conducted a resident survey. It was open for over 3 months from September through December. And the purpose of that was to really try to maximize participation among residents. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those results next. So one question that we asked, you know, we were interested in learning, hey, why do you choose to live in Wellington? The most popular responses by a wide margin, as you can see, were Wellington's small town culture and aesthetic, and that was followed, you know, by the affordability of housing. And I think when interpreting these results, it's important to consider that most respondents, right, most people in Wellington are going to be longtime homeowners, right, who whose mortgage payments, you know, are much lower than they would be if they were to purchase them today. So that could explain why, you know, they pointed to the affordability of housing as as one of the benefits of living in Wellington. But I think it's also important to consider that folks might have been, when they gave that answer, right, what they were thinking is, well, Wellington is affordable in relation to places like, you know, Boulder or Fort Collins, right? So this next question was, how difficult was it for you to locate housing in Wellington? And the results are organized by their length of stay and their current housing. And the main takeaway here is that for people who've lived in their housing for, you know, less than a year or for 1 to 3 years, right? So really in this post-COVID market, they're much more likely to say, hey, it was either difficult or very difficult to find housing in Wellington. Next, we had some questions aimed at trying to quantify, you know, the burden that housing costs are placing on residents. So we have a question here. How confident are you that you or someone in your household will be able to cover your upcoming payment on time? Of course, the majority are pretty confident, right? But still, you have 17% who say they're not so confident or not at all confident, right? And, you know, if you were to extrapolate these findings to the rest of the population, what that means, you know, that's a sizable number of people, right? This question was followed by one that asked, hey, you know, have housing costs significantly hindered your ability to do any of the following? And, you know, people said, you know, yeah, high housing costs have really made it difficult for me to save for emergencies, to save for retirement, as well as to pay off, you know, debt and other essential expenses, right, like Medicare and transportation and childcare. These questions were followed by a pair of questions that sort of go hand in hand. So people were asked, hey, are housing costs a major source of stress in your life? And nearly half of residents say yes. Next, they were asked, you know, hey, within the past year, have you limited your consumption of food, medicine, or other essential goods to help cover housing costs? And about 40% responded yes. So these questions really focus on residents' attitudes toward housing issues. So by a sizable margin, right, residents pointed to the rising cost of utility services as Wellington's most pressing challenge, right? But a significant percentage of folks also said, hey, you know, I'm really concerned about the fact that younger people can't afford to buy homes. You know, and this is something we heard throughout the research process, right? That it's become very common for people to either double up on housing by, for example, living with roommates, or by just living with their parents, right? Folks also pointed to the unaffordability of rent, and we also saw a significant percentage said there is inadequate senior housing in Wellington. Finally, we had a question. It's a bit more technical in nature, right? That basically said, hey, if a development plan provides affordable housing, should the town offer some type of incentives to make the development more feasible? So a plurality of folks, they either disagreed or strongly disagreed with such a proposal. But what I will say, based on our experience asking this question in other communities, is that the response to this is highly sensitive to question wording, right? If we had phrased it a little bit differently, then the response would have likely been very different. So next I'll turn it over to my colleague Lainey, who is gonna be talking to us about some of the recommendations that we've developed to get at these challenges.
Thanks, Christian. So kind of before we begin this segment of the presentation, I really just want to highlight that throughout this presentation and the report, we're really going to be identifying you'll see a series of solutions that have been identified. But a lot of this comes really with the understanding that not one single solution will address all of the housing needs in Wellington. It's going to be a combination of strategies and implementation methods really to come together and help accomplish a lot of the town's housing goals. So tonight you're going to see really a range of recommendations that we're going to be covering, coming really as a direct result of the data that Christian just presented, some of the strategies identified in your 2021 comprehensive plan, some of the regulations listed in your land use code, but also some best practices in housing. So really what we're going to be looking at tonight is the range of recommendations, and we're going to hit on some key strategies that are really going to work for Wellington. So before we begin, some of the general considerations really just to hit on is that a lot of the land in Wellington right now is entitled for single family residential. And then a lot of the vacant land too is really designated for some of those economic purposes. So think employment, retail, industry, things like that. And so a lot of the strategies are really going to be focused on optimizing the existing housing stock within the community. You're going to kind of see that highlighted through the existing housing composition, where 90% of the residential properties are single family detached homes. And what that really demonstrates to us is the opportunity to diversify housing products within the community. Again, kind of hitting on some of those economic considerations, and that a lot of the current land uses in the area. Really, we want to focus on prioritizing some revenue generating uses, and then again, really focusing on optimizing the existing stock rather than a lot of new development, and really being strategic with our approach in housing for the community. If you could swap next slide, please. Thanks. So the first kind of strategy that we want to hit on is going to be expanding accessory dwelling units. ADUs are essentially additional units on single family lots. They are currently allowed in Wellington, but we're seeing pretty limited ADU development, despite them being permitted. And kind of through conversations with the town, we've learned that a lot of that is due to some challenges with the permitting process, and whether that be dimensional standards that are required, permitting fees, things like that. And so throughout the report, we really wanted to make sure that we could hit on some ways to mitigate those challenges. ADUs are really great just because they support multi-generational housing. And so as Christian presented, seniors and young professionals are going to be really two key players that need affordable housing solutions. And so with that, they can be a great option for families, for folks who really want to add an additional unit. It really helps kind of alleviate a lot of the costs for community members. And so some of the strategies that we really looked at were increasing the maximum square footage and ADU quantities on the lot. So right now, Wellington currently permits up to 1,000 square feet for an ADU. And so there is the opportunity to kind of go back and explore that and potentially make and scale ADUs so that they are proportionate to the primary dwelling unit. Amending some of the design requirements, it's really important, right, that we have really great looking products in our great looking neighborhoods. And so for attached ADUs, really they function very similarly to like a bedroom addition. And so kind of maintaining some of the design and architectural style and looking consistent with the primary resident for the primary residence for the attached ADUs, but maybe kind of exploring some flexible design requirements for those detached products. What's really common these days is seeing some of the prefab ADUs. And so it's a much more attainable and affordable option, and it's a great way to increase unit supply. And so we still want to make sure that they're good looking products, but kind of building in a little bit of flexibility into that process. So reassessing utility connection and impact fees, that was kind of something that we have been hearing a lot from our stakeholder groups on a really costly barrier to unit development. And so kind of taking a look at that, we and then also reconsidering some of those owner occupancy requirements. And so why a lot of communities have those in place is to kind of protect you know, that neighborhood character and preventing a lot of short-term rentals. And so since there is an owner occupancy requirement right now, Wellington kind of has the upper hand in that they can get ahead and we're suggesting creating a registration process of sorts to kind of help track any ADUs that may be rented out. And so if there does come a time where the town determines that this may not be the path that we want to go down anymore, there is, you know, the position in place to help kind of support reverting back to some of those owner occupancy requirements. Renting out units can be a great way to help alleviate some mortgage costs for property owners. And so that's just another consideration to help address maybe some of those cost burden individuals and cost burden families. And then also introducing a pre-approved ADU program. And so something that we have seen be really successful in a lot of communities is having a program where essentially a board kind of determines and approves a set number of ADUs that can just be purchased directly by the property owner. And should they still meet dimensional requirements, they'd just be allowed to expedite that process and move through permitting a lot quicker and a lot cheaper. Next slide, please. Thanks. So incentivizing affordable development. And so a lot of these really apply primarily to multifamily products. And what these are just an opportunity to kind of help lower costs throughout the process. We really wanted to make sure, though, that a lot of the incentives we were building in were specifically for housing that was going to be affordable. And so lowering construction and application costs can help really alleviate a lot of the challenges that the development community goes through when it comes to processing, and then it really can help boost affordable housing development within Wellington. So as Christian mentioned earlier, 41% of renters are cost burden, and the median asking rent is $2,395, which is unaffordable for most households, and especially kind of looking to develop and build specifically for workforce housing products and also senior housing products. It's really important that we diversify and find solutions so that we can bring that cost down. So what does that look like? Really reevaluating parking standards specifically for affordable housing proposals. And in the report, you'll notice that there is some flexibility built in for projects that can demonstrate they are providing affordable housing. But with that, we really wanted to make sure that there were protections in place for the town should an affordable housing project convert to market rate later down the line, that all that parking can still be accommodated for on site. And so having that kind of option built in can really give the town the upper hand when it comes to supporting and working with the development community on affordable housing projects. Same thing goes with introducing flexibility for the design review process. It is really important to make sure that we are still building great looking products that will stand the test of time in Wellington. But it does kind of allow for, or we do kind of recommend maybe building in some flexibility into that process, which can look like allowing from an administrative side some discretion in the design review process. The next one, adopt inclusionary zoning. What that really means is for multifamily projects, requiring a certain percentage of the units to be affordable. This is something that is allowed in the state of Colorado, but it is something that we really want to make sure is understood and that we aren't accidentally discouraging new development. And so from the town side, we can also kind of build in some strategies to work with the development community to promote that affordable housing. And then again, kind of with expedited review timeframes or waived or reduced permit fees for affordable housing projects. That's just another example of of an opportunity really just to lower costs for projects. Next slide. So supporting housing rehabilitation, preservation, and infill development. So this is a strategy that we're really excited for Wellington. So although the median housing stock was built in 2007, there also are a lot of really great pre-1960s homes in the area. A lot of older homes are what we call NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing, and so it's really a way to maintain a lot of the existing housing stock, which is much more cost effective than building new units. And so kind of helps prevent that conversion to market rate units and promotes, the most efficient use of infrastructure. And so actually the 2021 comprehensive plan identifies really strategic areas within Wellington for redevelopment and infill. And so kind of leveraging that plan in place can really help drive the community and support the implementation of this strategy. So kind of also baked within that, introducing a lot of housing rehabilitation programs. And so that can kind of be small scale, like grant programs of sorts, to support like the rehabilitation of properties. So that can be for simple things like, windows to be resealed or improvements to insulation, things like that. Some of those small incremental updates and renovations that can really maximize the life of some of those housing products. Creating an inventory of that naturally occurring affordable housing really helps the town kind of keep a pulse on housing within the community and identifying opportunities to work directly with property owners. And then also encouraging, again, that infill development as seen in the 2021 comprehensive plan. Next slide. So updating dimensional standards. So this is one that we continue to work on with the planning staff. And so I kind of want to start with smaller lot size really enable more units per acre, and that cost per unit really helps keep housing affordable for residents. And so kind of facilitating a lot more higher density development too is also another strategy to keep that cost per unit really low. And again, really less infrastructure is less costs or lower costs, excuse me. And so that can help things out with seeing the development of affordable housing in the community. So some of the strategies we really looked at were revising some of those lot dimensional requirements in the R2 and R3 category. And so with that, really reducing the minimum width for some of the detached units and attached units, just to kind of help create space for additional lots to be developed. The same kind of goes with increasing the max net density in R3 and the R4 categories. And then also just kind of recognizing that a lot of that new annexed land that may eventually be a part of Wellington should consider a balance of land uses. So not just residential, but also some of the civic, industrial, commercial employment uses to support residents, which ultimately can create a much more economically viable community. I think there are a lot of opportunities for mixed use within the community that to utilize land for a variety of purposes. And I think that can be a really great opportunity for Wellington. Next slide, please. Thanks. Diversify housing stock. So I kind of want to start actually by speaking to multifamily in the R4 and R4 district. So a lot of the housing stock in the downtown area is older, right? It's a lot of detached single family. And so it's important really kind of as we talk about diversifying housing stock to make sure that we aren't going to compromise the housing stock or the character of that area. And so the 2021 comprehensive plan does designate an activity center near the downtown. And so it really is important to recognize the scale and context of that area. And so it's really about looking at what options there are for multifamily. Multifamily doesn't have to be really large, tall, scary buildings. It can look like different things. So it can be something like townhomes or condos, which can be a really nice addition to the community and also work appropriately in the context of the area. But it could be, senior housing solutions, things like that. And so improving housing diversity is also, as Cody mentioned, a Board of Trustees strategic goal. And so I think it's really important to kind of highlight that as we look at options. So mixed use, as I mentioned before, can be a really great opportunity for Wellington to maximize a lot of the developable land in the area. Live workspaces are kind of an emerging residential employment, type land use that we're seeing pop up all over the place. And so with that kind of supporting also though, like a gentle density approach, which means making sure that everything is built and appropriately scaled in the context of the area. We also talked a little bit about permitting smaller lots. And all of these things really can help address rental availability and deficiencies, but also maximize the efficiency of land use. Next slide. Senior housing. So this is a really great opportunity for Wellington. So senior housing is great. And especially for communities that don't currently have a lot of multifamily options, senior housing is a really great way to start and gradually introduce that type of product in the area. It is meeting, a very important demand and for a very important population, and really fits into the fabric of the community quite seamlessly. So really just kind of working to support a variety of senior housing options, so independent living, assisted living, memory care facilities, things like that. There are a lot of really great programs that can be explored to help address housing solutions for our seniors. And again, this kind of comes back to Wellington. It has a growing demand for this population. And so kind of getting ahead and looking at ways that we can improve housing for seniors in the community. Thanks, Christian. Kind of the next two slides are really going to cover some funding opportunities for the community. I won't hit on all of them right now, but the report really details. Oh, can you pull up the presentation real quick, Christian? Sorry. There we go. Perfect. But the report does a really great job kind of detailing out all of these strategies and opportunities for funding. And so community development block grants are a very common one that you'll see. And so those are used primarily for housing improvements. So again, supporting the preservation of some of those older homes, but really good and important housing stock. The self-help ownership program is another really great one. And so a lot of these are really driven by partnerships, and so kind of targeted towards nonprofits, but it helps identify land for acquisition through community land trusts, removing another kind of cost barrier there. And then Section 811 is targeted towards some of the lower income folks with disabilities and kind of creating housing opportunities for that population. Next slide. All right, so some of the DOLA funding opportunities, kind of looking at housing development, grant and loan funds. Colorado has been really great in addressing and being proactive with housing needs for their communities. And so the state has been working really hard with municipalities to explore some of the housing needs in their communities and help kind of initiate the process to address those challenges. So Proposition 123 really, this is a little bit more of like a coordinated effort, and there is some planning that's involved, but really it's the town committing to the addition of 3% of additional, a 3% addition of affordable housing over the course of three consecutive years. And so again, kind of is a little bit more of a coordinated effort, but it's a really great way to increase affordable housing stock. And then also the creation of a supportive housing program. So really what this is kind of going after is a lot of that workforce development housing, some of that senior housing that we talked about. And this is really the opportunity to work on very tailored housing solutions for some of the most pressing, just to address some of the most pressing kind of housing needs in the community for those populations. Next slide. So thank you so much for your time. We're happy to take any questions, kind of cover the report, and Cody has been a great partner in working with us throughout this process. And Christian, kind of any closing thoughts on the presentation? You're muted.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add except we look forward to your feedback and questions.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Trustee Teets?
I wish we would have had more than 3% of renters fill out this form. I think it would have been great to see kind of more flexibility in what rent compared to, we had 95% homeowners and 3% renters. I love the way that this was laid out. I really would love to hear Trustee Moyer's feedback on this one, just because of the fact that this is her cup of tea. So I'm looking forward to getting to hear some of her feedback in the future. I liked the short-term strategies, the 0 to 2 years. I like the fact that it pays mind to 50% of our community said that they would not like to see anything subsidized, more so going with what works and how can we assist the developers in bringing more items to this area. I know Berthoud was a prime example of that one, when they built their lower cost and they built smaller footprints and built the home on top of the garage. There was huge success in that entire subdivision. That development sold out exceedingly quick. I would love to see more duplexes. My subdivision has duplexes. They're gorgeous. Come to our area, and yeah, I like how this has been laid out in the implementation timeline. I would love to say that offering funding or anything like that towards this would be fantastic if our budget did not look the way it does right now. So hopefully that improves in the next few years. But all in all, I'm very grateful for what you guys have put together and presented. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Wiegand?
I appreciate the presentation. I know we're between a rock and a hard place on most of this. So many things are out of our control. You know, you got insurance rates going through the roof right now. You got real estate taxes on the state and all the levels escalating unbelievably. Interest rates are high right now. Even if they came down, probably the cost or the sale prices are going to increase at that point too. So, you know, we got a lot of things that we have to look at as far as trying to make it affordable. I think that's going to be a very extremely tough project to, you know, try to accomplish. You know, I know we got the accessory dwellings, and it sounds good. I don't know how that would actually work. I got a fairly big lot in my little addition over there, and I have no idea how we could even put something like that in there. So it'd be interesting to get that expanded on down the road too. I know that's a big thing. I think the state just passed it. It's going to be going into effect midsummer. I know Fort Collins, I believe, has just passed it, where it's effective now. So like I said, it's going to be interesting to see what we come up with, what restrictions we have on it. You know, setbacks, parking is going to be a big thing, you know, and, you know, a lot of the places too, it's, you know, most people probably say it sounds like it's a great idea, but not in my backyard. And so, I mean, we definitely have to, you know, be sympathetic to all the property owners here too. You know, we are very much a bedroom community right now, not just a bedroom community for Fort Collins and southern towns, but also for Cheyenne. I know Cheyenne has a very limited housing market up there, and we got probably a lot of people moving down here that are working in that expanded economy up there. So we got a lot of work ahead of us, and I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the presentation here. I think it was very detailed, and it's going to be a good start. Thank you.
Thank you, trustee.
Thank you, trustee Daly.
I'm so happy that we've done this. I was worried. This is so incredibly more worrisome and discouraging than I had hoped or assumed was our housing situation in Wellington. What I see in the data, well, I do have a question first before I get into that. In the notes of each of the visuals, it notes that it says Fort Collins and AMI of 118,000. Is the Fort Collins, is that AMI used for all of those visuals? Compared to like
Yeah,
101 is what
so-
we're estimating for Wellington?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah. So when estimating the affordability of, rent or home prices in 2024, the reason we need to use AMI for the Fort Collins MSA rather than Wellington specific data is just because the Wellington specific data is available only from the American Community Survey, which lags
22.
by a number of years. So yeah, so if you're asking about the handout, yeah, much of that is based on the Fort Collins MSA AMI. Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to note that because, I mean, 101 to 118 is a significant difference
Right.
in percentages,
Yeah.
but likely
sure.
Wellington's increased since 2022 as well. So
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
I wanted to consider if like the figures that we're looking at are actually maybe potentially like 17% difference or more worrisome than what we're seeing in those diagrams. But I think this makes sense, and I appreciate that explanation. Thank you. What I saw was that we had a higher AMI than if you were to look at averages for Larimer County, Weld County, Colorado, yet our poverty rate and our unemployment rate are also much higher than all of those as well. And that's incredibly discouraging when you think of, like you said, the range in which of poverty that we're seeing a much higher percentage here, even though we may have a higher median income. A lot of times that higher median income, we say, well, we have a disposable income to spend on extra things like going out to eat and buying things, and we're not capturing that money in Wellington. But the truth is, a median's a median, and there's some people, everybody's really struggling, but there are some people who are beyond struggling in Wellington too, and more so than across Larimer County, Weld County, and across Colorado. And that's sad. We also mentioned in here that housing expenses have prevented saving goals and paying off other debts or major expenses. That's not, all those were, where you should responsibly be spending your money outside of housing costs. We're not talking about, again, the economic vitality of spending extra money elsewhere, retail and those kind of things. So this really does have that whole cycle, whole picture of what's going on from an economic perspective in Wellington, and where we may, guess that we have disposable income, but really that's likely not the case. The recommendations I saw, I'm really excited about as we consider about how we can, as policymakers, actually improve potential and possibilities in Wellington. The ones that really stood out to me was expanding mixed uses across different zones, adjusting lot sizes, which we've already been going through these things with independently with developers on their specific projects. And I think that we need to, expand that policy and make sure that's easier for people to accomplish what our goals as a community are, as well as what their financial goals in development are. More administrative design and approvals in order to expedite processes, everything relating to ADUs. We've been hearing that nonstop at every CML conference, everywhere, that, a mother-in-law suite is the way that you make it affordable for your extended family, or a renter, or all those scenarios that you listed. Those are essentials that let people use the property that they own already to either serve as income or to be able to house their families. So everything regarding ADUs, I want to aggressively approach and see from a policy perspective, again, how we make it easier for people to afford to live. And then the other parts, just simplifying projects, processes, even creating incentives. The tickets for ADUs, you get this many ADUs per year, and here's your streamlined ticket to go. I think that sounds amazing. And then all the efforts for aging in place are really important because we have very minimal options in Wellington. One of the stats that really spoke to me is it said 60% of the people were certain they'd be able to make their next housing payment. And so it was kind of like, oh, 60% yes, and then down from there. But what I see is 40% aren't. So that's almost half of our community. They can say, I'm absolutely positive I'm going to be able to make my next housing payment. And that hurts my heart. So I'm excited we're doing this. I'm excited we're moving forward. It's really important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Dr. Caron and Ms. Corey, for the presentation tonight. The details that have been included in the packet are absolutely outstanding. Lots of data in there. Just a couple things I want to touch on. Obviously, when it comes to some of the plats that this board considers approving going forward and that sort of thing, obviously, as far as the Sage redevelopment or second stage of Sage 2 development, I think we did have some multifamily units included with that. I guess I would be curious to see, obviously, with Proposition 123 and the state's funding in that regard. I believe it was mentioned that we would need to increase the total number of affordable housing stock by about 3% over the year for the next period of 3 years. I guess I would be curious whether we could potentially consider, obviously, that approval of that plat, but potentially future plats. And it certainly seems to be clear to me that residents would very much look forward to seeing some of your duplex and townhome type options. So I think I would encourage the board as we look to future plats to continue what we've done as far as this last approval cycle and seeing if we can continue moving forward with townhomes and duplex style options in addition to obviously single family homes. One of the other things I wanted to touch on was increasing the R3 density by lowering lot sizes. I believe we did go through a little bit of that when we had approved the Saddleback plat. I would be curious to see, what I don't want to see is homes obviously stacked on top of each other. But if there's potential for any more wiggle room in that in terms of potentially even getting even bit smaller lot sizes, I think it's worth looking at. But again, I don't want to see homes on top of each other. That's certainly not something I'd like to see. So, and then another note I had here, when we consider redevelopment and infill of R4, obviously some of those homes are quite a bit older. I think it would be worth potentially, obviously, one of the big points that this board has made for a long time, and obviously residents have said the same, is that we want development to pay its own way, especially in terms of impact fees and these types of things. But when we're considering redevelopment or maybe somebody wants to, tear a home down and build fresh on, our downtown zoned land, it could be worth looking at potentially lowering permitting fees for those types of things, right? Because it's not new development, it's development that's already been there. Impact fees may not necessarily, well, anyway, just to throw that out there for the board's consideration. And then I did want to ask Cody, Mr. Bird, as far as some of the numbers I had seen in the water development plan in terms of future population estimates seem to be a bit higher than what I had seen in the report provided by the team here. So I just wanted to ask if maybe you had a chance to meet with Ms. Smith as far as those numbers goes. I know she uses very conservative numbers in her reports, so I just wanted to check on them.
Yeah, to the question, trustee Mason, thank you. And that is something that we're going to continue to talk about. As Christian alluded to earlier, one of the challenges that we run into when you start pulling data sets for one topic, when you start changing and pull different data from a different source, then it's hard to keep your apples aligned with apples. And the population projections is one that we want to look at. Again, the ACS data, or American Community Survey data, is a 5-year estimate, and the data is lagging behind by 2 to 3 years currently. And so when you extrapolate that population projection, it's going to be a different number than what we at a local level are anticipating based on actual development projects and local need. So there is a process that we're going to be working with Christian and Laney on to help align as best we can and still maintain the data integrity.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Bird. So I did just want to, yeah, and to Trustee Tietz's point, certainly, the town is in a difficult situation with its budget as far as that goes. So I certainly don't think we're in a position where we can certainly subsidize some of these projects, but I would very much consider us, you ask us to consider that, we look at Proposition 123, those are all state funds that have already been set aside. If we can go out there and get after free money just by increasing our affordable housing on plats that this board approves going forward, I think that's absolutely something to look forward to.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Caron, Ms. Corey, for your presentation. Very well put together. We're definitely an interesting community in the sense of that median income and then that rate of poverty. When looking at all the data, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bird, but it kind of feels as if we have people that are living below their means in certain homes that they're not moving out of, and that pushes the value of those rents higher for those that may normally be able to afford it. They can't because of that current situation. So I think a large portion of this is not just only looking at the affordable home side of things, but also being able to grow up into different size homes within the community to kind of help that cost variation. So I think that's a huge point. On the ADUs, definitely. I think those are going to be a big game changer for this community. Needs to be pursued. That also helps people age in place. May not be in the same home, but at least with their family in a more affordable area. And then that would open up more homes on the market technically. When it comes to redevelopment of the downtown district, infill, things of that nature, we do have a lot of aging population in that downtown where maybe their lot is double, triple, quadruple the normal lot size. Portion of that lot or majority of their lot is undeveloped. Maybe streamlining the process in which they could section that off, sell that to where it could then be developed. I know personally from conversations I've had with close neighbors, that's something that's they're struggling with is their aging. They can't keep up with their property and they want to do that. So streamlining that process, I think, would be huge. Yeah, 123, definitely. I don't think subsidizing is the right way to go with how that came through on the survey. If or when the budget would allow, I think it'd be at least worth looking into if the state funds aren't there or things of that nature. I'm a huge believer in affordable housing and trying to get those that don't have the means to get a roof over their head. So that's huge. If and when we can pursue something along those lines, I'm all for that. But obviously, I think the townhomes and the duplexes and the senior housing are going to be the biggest factors that we face. And we don't have any true senior housing in this community at all, in the sense of a community where they can have a retirement community sense. And duplexes and whatnot were hugely successful in Windsor in the late 90s, early 2000s to be able to open up their affordable housing over there. And they did it beautifully with well-dressed neighborhoods. So that's all I have to say. Thank you guys once again for your presentation, and thank all of you for your comments, and Mr. Bird. Thank you. Oh, yes, Trustee Fields.
So you discussed the 3% per year for so many years on affordable housing. Do the ADUs count in that equation? So if you open it up, the accessory dwelling units, does that count towards that 3%?
They should, and ADUs by their nature are not going to be market rate typically. That's not the market that's going to be attracted to them. But we would double check to make sure that those do qualify for Proposition 123 if that's something that we can pursue.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing on the ADUs, or anything of that nature, kind of like the developmental envelope allowed within the code. Maybe, I don't know if we could look at, I don't know what that would look like setback wise, things of that nature for structures.
Yeah, as Trustee Wiegand
But I don't want to get
commented,
in the weeds, yeah.
yeah, there are a lot of components necessary to be looked at the ADUs. And at a high level, I'll maybe just circle back that when the town redid its land use code a couple of years ago, we did specifically allow ADUs as a use by right within many of our residential zone districts. But what we found in conversations with potential owners who wanted to consider those, they ran into a myriad of challenges, and they weren't all the same. It really depended on a lot by lot basis. My backyard's not deep enough to do it, or I want to attach it, but then I don't want to modify my house. It puts me into a position where I'm doing a substantial renovation that I wasn't prepared to take on, to impact fee and equity. And so we're looking at all of those options, right sizing, not just the ADUs, but the other housing product types also. And kind of to Trustee Mason's comment about the lot dimensions for R2 and R3, we're looking at those scenarios, and we're going to make recommendations for allowing a few different types of strategies to hopefully achieve multiple of challenges that we've seen and heard of. So we know that there's going to be a lot of pieces to look at. Our overall goal in kind of the and this is me wrapping things up, so I don't want to keep drag it out any longer. You guys have been very patient. Kind of for next steps, I've been taking notes throughout the meeting. I heard a lot of support for some of those short-term strategies that are code and policy level discussions, support for ADUs, support for looking at those lot dimensions and lot sizes to find flexibility. Those were the shorter term recommendations because they don't have a huge cost. They're things that some of them are really relatively simple text changes to the code to provide a pretty big bang for the buck. And so as we're going through next steps, we're going to be working on a couple of things. We do have this draft housing needs and affordability assessment on the town's website on the planning page for public review. And we are accepting feedback on that. So we want to continue to hear from folks if there's comments to be heard. The information that we got from stakeholder meetings, from the Planning Commission last Monday, from the board tonight, we're going to synthesize the feedback that we're hearing and update that the needs assessment to incorporate all the comments and feedback. Staff is also going to be bringing to the Planning Commission at their March meeting, March 3rd, a first draft of these are the recommended those short-term strategy changes to our code that can help address some of these topics. So we'll be presenting that to the Planning Commission as a public hearing item for them to consider that. We'll then be subsequently coming back to this board with those recommendations and the Planning Commission's feedback. We'll be presenting what we believe to be a final draft of the housing needs assessment. We'll be seeking acceptance of that draft or that final draft report as a policy document of the town. And we'll be presenting in a public hearing the code changes that are recommended based on those short-term strategies. Any questions on the next steps as we're moving through this process?
I'm sorry. As it was mentioned earlier, housing that stacked on top of each other. When I was younger, I, for one, would have preferred the housing that had a very small footprint. simply because of the fact that I didn't own a lawnmower. I would not have known how to tend to a larger piece of property when I was younger. Those are, as our mayor said, those are the building blocks for which you grow and stay over time in your community. So I don't know if this is something that can be included in, or if you plan on including that in, but if the board agrees, I would like to see like the smaller footprint, like small footprint homes be able to be included in those first few years, simply because if we say we want to fix the housing and affordability thing and we want to do it as quick as possible, if you can find developers that want to build those small template homes that can build it on a much smaller section of land, people build into that, buy into that area, and you can incorporate it into larger development. But people specifically buy into that area, one, because it is well below that median average, but also two, seniors and young humans would like the low maintenance, low care. It makes it super easy for when you have people transporting back and forth to CSU for education. But that, I feel, might be one of the key topics that helps bring that median cost, and correct me if I'm wrong, but brings that median cost down to a much more affordable level for the starting out or the retiree.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Teets. It's definitely one of the, you touched on a couple of things there, which is actually really great because all of them help move the needle in terms of affordability and flexibility, I think is the other component there. When you look at generational data and trends, a lot of young home buyers don't have the same desires for a large yard that has kind of been the American dream for a couple of generations. We're seeing changes to that. And there is the smaller yards, less maintenance responsibility. I want to be active and go do other things, not spend time mowing the yard. We're seeing those changes, and there need to be different housing product types to meet those different needs. When we went through our land use code adoption process a couple of years ago, one of the things that we were kind of proactive on was not having the same minimum lot size or minimum dwelling size requirements that other communities have had over the years. So we actually removed that and just stuck to what's the minimum required by building code to meet, livability standards. So we already have a very low, minimum dwelling unit size requirement, but now we need to right size the lots to make sure that we don't require, like someone could build a very small unit that's affordable, but the land costs are so large because we have a lot size that's not commensurate with the product that they're building. We have, so we'll definitely continue to look at that. And one of the things I'll share that we've heard from several of our stakeholder groups and development community, they've already identified some of these models that Trustee Teets is referring to, that they've got a market for those smaller units. And one of the recurring things that we've been hearing is a lot of our, affordable units that we're trying to build for first-time home buyers, they may want a 2-car garage or 3-car garage, but they don't need a 2-car garage or 3-car garage. What they really need is a roof over their head. What they really need is basic amenities. They don't need to have a basement. And so going slab on grade or an insulated slab has been a strategy that's worked for several of our builders. And so our development community has really been on the forefront of some of these changes. And these are things that they're asking for. If we can help deliver from a code standpoint, or even just remove the barriers that might otherwise exist in regulation, will make a dramatic impact on how our building community meets our needs. So all great points. I did more than just answer a question. I shared a little bit more information there, but great feedback, and thank you. If you have other thoughts, we still want to hear those as well.
Trustee Daly?
If the recommendation, you're going to come back with the short-term wins, I guess, above and beyond lot size, I would like to also, if there's any obvious changes that need to be made in density, as well as building height, as well as setbacks. We might as well roll all those go together. So I don't want to just limit you to only looking at lot size when all those are part of that same exact equation.
Thank you for that. We are taking a look at all of those, and one thing I found just today, we have a zone category that doesn't currently allow manufactured housing as a use by right, and we're gonna change that one too. It's an easy thing to change, and it's actually surprised me that it may have just been a typographical error in the final adoption, but we're gonna get it fixed. So all those things we're looking at, and I appreciate the support for those.
Member Tim.
Yeah, and, just one final thing to add, Mr. Bird. I'm sure staff is aware of all these things, but you may consider looking at like the Storybook neighborhood on the north side of Fort Collins. They've got some pretty, lot smaller lot sizes, I think, than what R3 is now. And I don't know if it would be worth adding an additional zone, R5, like we need in additional zone. But, if it's worth considering something like that, just so that density's kind of there, and to trustees Tietz's very, very well met points there, that could fit that bill. So you might use that subdivision as a template.
Yeah, we'll certainly take a look at it. Thank you for the suggestion.
Thank you, sir. All right, thank you, Mr. Bird.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Caron and Ms. Corey. Thank you. All right, Ms. Clerk, will you please read the title for the items on the consent agenda?
January 28th, 2025 meeting minutes, resolution number 06-2025, approving a third amendment to the intergovernmental agreement between the town of Berthoud, Colorado and the town of Timnath, Colorado concerning a joint agreement for animal control services with NOCO Humane, and resolution number 07-2022, a resolution authorizing the temporary closure of portions of State Highway 1, Cleveland Avenue, 1st Street, 2nd Street, 3rd Street, 4th Street, and 5th Street within the town of Wellington during the inaugural St. Paddy's Parade and Festival on March 15th, 2025.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion on the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Ms. Clerk, may I get a roll call, please?
Trustee Daly?
Yes.
Trustee Teets?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mason?
Yes.
Mayor Shosse?
Yes.
Mayor, the motion passes.
Thank you. Next we have reports. Mr. Dan Sapienza, Town Attorney.
No report at this time.
Thank you, sir. Deputy Town Administrator, Ms. Huddling.
No reports, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions on any of the board reports, from the board on staff reports that were in the packet? No. Are there any board reports? Trustee Teets.
Happy Valentine's Day. So
Oh, yeah.
I just would like to say that it's one of those days that we should always appreciate our loved ones a little bit more. Not that we shouldn't appreciate them all the time, but I hope the community has an amazing Valentine's Day.
Thank you for reminding me. Just kidding, sweetheart. Okay. Having no further business, do I hear a motion to adjourn the regular meeting?
I make a motion.
Perfect. Ms. Clerk, will I get a roll call, please?
Trustee Daly?
Seconding, yes.
Trustee Moyer? Trustee Teets?
Yes.
Trustee Wiegand?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mason?
Yes.
Mayor Shosse?
Yes.
Mayor, that motion passes.
Thank you. Now adjourn the regular meeting, time being 8:18 p.m. I will now open up a work session with Mr. Dan Sapienza, presenting to us this evening, the trustees bylaw discussion.
I'm going to stand.
May I ask for a brief
Yeah.
break?
Oh, yeah, sure. Cool. Yeah, we're gonna take a quick 5. Wellington deputy. Thank you.
I decided to stand because I needed to stand a little bit here. So this is a continuation of the discussion that started in December and certainly before December, it started, over the last couple years about the bylaws for the Board of Trustees. And I do want to apologize. I discovered something this evening, which is I sent an email to the board on January 31st with a copy of the bylaws with a number of notes from the past meeting requesting some feedback. We all get busy, so I didn't receive any responses. I thought, well, the board's got some other things on their plate. Maybe they just wanted to address that in the meeting. Talking with Trustee Teets today, I discovered while I confirmed that email was sent, nobody received it. So part of the plan for tonight's meeting was to discuss your thoughts that you've been considering over the last week and a half, 2 weeks since I sent that email and you didn't get that email. So I do apologize. I will resend it tomorrow. And so I do ask, when I send that email, just respond and say, hey, I got it, just so I know. And I'm going to also talk to Hannah and the other folks and figure out what I'm doing wrong, because I thought I knew how to send email and it turns out maybe I don't. So send a response saying I received it, but I would really welcome at that time absolutely any feedback. You know, if you're reading through there and you see typos, send those to me. I think that's a perfect opportunity to do that. Want to use this time to the extent we want to use this time now to kind of talk about some kind of higher level items. You know, one of the reasons this got continued from December was in December, there wasn't a full Board of Trustees sitting here, and this is an item that kind of requires consensus and agreement among all of you about how the board's going to work. I think there were 4 members in attendance at that meeting, and Trustee Teets, I believe, was remote. And so now here again, we only have 5 of the 7. So if we need to continue this for a later date, we can always do that. But I do have a couple kind of big picture items that I didn't feel like I got real consensus on at the last meeting. I want to maybe facilitate a little bit more discussion about them, and then we can work on that the next time. The first one of those items, as I open up my notes, was in section 5 related to attendance. The language, let me pull it open real quick. This is section 5B. B2, excessive absences as determined by the Board of Trustees may be considered cause for removal by the Board of Trustees pursuant to the Wellington Municipal Code. That's the language that was presented in December. In the packet version that you have right now, there's a red line where I added in more than 3 unexcused absences shall be considered to be excessive. Kind of defining what excessive was. There was a desire to define more, you know, what is an excused absence? What is excessive? We need a number. One of the reasons I didn't include that originally, I'm going to explain kind of that logic, and then we can figure out if you do really want to dive deep and figure out what that number is. The board can't have a process or can't have a bylaw that says 3 unexcused absences and you're out, right? The process for removal of a board member for malfeasance or negligence in office it's defined in the Wellington Municipal Code. It's defined in state statute. It requires a public hearing. It requires a vote. It requires a rather large process because expelling an elected member of a board is not to be taken lightly. So the bylaws simply can't say, if you miss more than 3, you're automatically out. And so then it begs the question, do you need a number at all? Like, you're going to have a hearing, and it's going to be subjective, because even if the bylaws said, we consider 3 to be excessive if they're unexcused, well, then you have a hearing, and at the hearing, that trustee who maybe was absent, well, they get to respond, right? It's they then present their evidence, which might be, well, I missed those because of X, Y, and Z, and I didn't call ahead because of this. And at that time, the board has to make a decision regardless of what the bylaws say. So trying to nail it down to some like automatic, if this number, then excessive, then remove, that's not how the law works. And so that's why I didn't include it originally. It's kind of squishy, but that's how these things are. Removal is going to have to be by that hearing. So that was the idea there. But, you know, I think there is logic, and I think it is good to put in something like 3 absences will be considered excessive. That way, when you have that hearing, you could say 3, and we all agreed that 3 was too much, right? It would help in that, and it would help define for the board. It won't be legally binding, as I said, that automatically they're out, but it might be, it'll give that cause, and it'll kind of defines what cause is for removal. So that would be a suggestion. Maybe it's still a little squishy, but so yeah.
Per year or per term?
Per year or per term.
Just got.
I mean, I
don't have that designated.
don't think this board is, since I've sat here, ever had a true unexcused absence from anybody.
Previous boards have,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
what we're
But the
looking at,
scenario
making
has-
sure.
happened in the past.
Yes. So. I mean, 3 per
I don't-
year. I personally would say a year, because
Then I would say 3 in a 12-month period. So that way it's not in a calendar year, it's kind of 3 during a 12-month period, something like that. I think that's a great point, that there needs to be a time limit on it.
I'm super flexible, so whatever you guys choose on this, I'm super flexible on how many we choose to go with to set into, to codify it. So our town attorney has more confidence in knowing that he's doing what he needs to do if it needs to be done. Prime example, this evening, trustee Moyer is absent because she is literally in DC representing affordable housing. And so that would, you know, it's one of those things where we might not know where she is, but it's
she's doing.
no
her
doubt
job.
that she's doing something that's doing something better for Wellington. So the 3 unexcused absences is fine. Is defining is who we contact. We've always just kind of said sending a message to the town administrator or
That's in the section right above.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
says
that's in
contact
PI.
the
Yeah.
clerk, administrator. So basically, let somebody know, and it gives the list of who you need to contact. I there.
And that's not going to be expulsion. I mean, that's going
No,
to
there's
bring
no,
it,
we cannot, we
No.
cannot do that.
all, it would come up here and then it would be presented
It-
in front of the board at that point.
If a board member had
Right.
had enough absences in whatever the time period is that the board decided,
Be worrisome.
this person needs to be removed. Step 1 is there has to be a motion to do that. We have to give notice. I mean,
It'd be a process.
there's a process. There's a process, yeah. But I think, I really appreciate, the time period is good. So I recommend maybe 3 within a 12-month period. Again, it's still a little squishy on the details, but there's a process. And I think that it also is, because this is a document that's intended to be agreed to by the board, we want some consensus on this. It's the board agreeing that, yeah, we all believe that 3 is too much. So, all right. Well, so that's great. I'll move on from that one. That's just one that we had, there's a little bit of discussion on before. Consent calendar. This is an item that's in section 6B4. The discussion was, in December, was largely about who can remove an item from the consent calendar. And really there are 3 options, and I think all 3 were somewhat discussed at that December meeting. The first option is a board member may remove an item by motion. So then it would require a vote. Second option would be a board member may remove an item. Simply, I would like this number 3 on the consent agenda removed, and then it gets taken off automatically without a motion, without a vote. And really the third option is anybody can remove an item from the consent agenda, including a member of the public. And so all 3 were sort of discussed at the last meeting. The benefit of allowing any person, including a member of the public, to remove a consent agenda item is as long as an item is on the consent agenda, there's no specific period for public comment on that item, right? And so if I'm sitting here in the audience and an item's on consent, yeah, I could get up and speak during the general public comment period, but if I have strong feelings about that consent item, I would like to be given the opportunity to speak. So that's why many boards do allow anybody in the public to remove an item. You don't have to allow that. Trustee Cannon last time said that there was some legal issue. You can not allow that if you would like. Some communities have stopped allowing any member to do it because it has been used as a kind of a way to gum up the works, I'll say. Well, there's 5 items on the consent agenda. I want them all off the consent agenda just to slow down the meeting and make sure I get an opportunity to speak. Yeah.
Potentially, they could speak in public comment on it and then pull it and speak again.
Yeah, I think we would have to kind of figure out the timing of when this process happens.
Yeah. Okay. That's just a thought.
If I could maybe make a suggestion on this, and I think it's kind of what I had alluded to last time, was I very much consider the consent agenda to be separate from actual agenda items, right? So if a member of the public wants to speak during public comment about a consent agenda item, they should feel free to do that. And if a member of the board is so compelled at that point to make a motion prior to approval of the consent agenda, that it could potentially be pulled at that time.
By a
But-
board member.
By a board member, right. I think, to your point, Mr. Sapienza, to simply allow public to pull items for just any reason without, how do I put this? To what you alluded to gumming up the works, if you will, I would want to avoid that type of situation. So I would say if a board member is so compelled before the consent agenda is approved that they want to make a motion to have that item removed based off whatever public comment was, that would be my suggestion.
But then, so you're, right there, you said a motion to remove an item. So are you in favor of a motion to remove an item, or a member of the board may remove an item? There's a difference there. One is no vote. One is a
Yeah,
motion.
I would say any board member could remove an item at that time, yeah.
So like I said, there's kind of three options, right? Like one is the most, it requires a vote and a process. One is any board member simply removes the item, and the kind of the third option is anybody. So, okay, now that, just want to clarify. And trustees.
So I think in how I see it is I'm comfortable if you guys feel that a community member can ask for it to be pulled, or if we choose not to have a community member. The one thing I would ask is if we are going to open it up where a community member is going to be able to come up, speak in public comment, and ask for something to be removed and put on the action items, that we have to rearrange how we handle the business meetings in general, just because public comment, how it would set out here, I just want to make sure if we have amendments to the agenda, but then someone comes after in public comment and then asks us to pull. So we just look at the planning of how that happens in our business meetings.
And I think the order would be the agenda, when you set the agenda at the beginning, you're setting the agenda for the consent agenda is located at this time. However, what I'm referring to with taking an item off the consent agenda would happen during the consideration of the consent agenda. It effectively is another amendment to the agenda afterward, and that's how many of them do it. I've been researching a lot on process around how other communities deal with this consent agenda item, and in many cases, it's at any time prior to the vote on the consent agenda. So it would even be, after you call the agenda, the consent agenda, the clerk reads all of the items on there, and somebody, right before somebody makes a motion, I'd like to pull something off there, right? It happens that late. But I think we could work around that, but I think it is a workable solution because, and especially if during the public comment, the mayor says, any member of the public can speak to a non-agenda item, and that would and speak to consent agenda items. If somebody got up and said, I have an issue with consent agenda item number 3, it's a great time for the board to kind of think about it and say, okay, I heard some talk about that. We want you to discuss that, and we pull it off at a later time.
Well, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sapienza, but I think that would be an appropriate, potentially inappropriate use of just a point of order right before the consent agenda. Simply a board member could make a point of order. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove X item from the consent agenda.
It wouldn't be a point, it wouldn't technically be a point
would-
of order, but I think I think that would be the perfect time. I can write some language to help kind of smooth that over, but
So well, then we allow additional public comment before the consent agenda, so someone can actually come up and say they want to pull an item from it?
it would be public comment.
Got it.
The standard public comment
Okay.
happens before the consent agenda.
Sounds
So,
good.
It would, if somebody wanted to speak to that, it would inform the board, and a member of the board at that time could say, Dan was speaking about this consent agenda item. I do think we should pull that off. We should have a discussion about that.
Got it. So my thing is I think any board member should be able to pull an item if they have questions. I'm totally fine if someone comes in public comment and says that they would like something pulled. That's totally fine too. Does that answer, is that the two talking points that you were looking for as far as feedback?
If somebody asked they want it pulled, it would still require.
Would it require a board member or would they just pull it?
No, it would require a board member to say, yes, I would like to pull
That
that.
answers this question. I
Perfect.
think.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. That,
Is that all gravy?
okay.
Gravy.
Okay, great. The third large item that I don't know we'll entirely get through tonight, but this is proclamations. There's a lot of discussion about proclamations, and I didn't make any changes to that section here because I didn't get the sense there's real consensus on the changes that were desired. I wanted to speak a little bit to the reasoning behind the process that I had put in here. And have some, hear a little bit more. So a proclamation is really intended to not be it's not a policy document. A lot of towns actually call them ceremonial documents. And they even refer to the piece of paper as seen some here, refer to it as a keepsake. You know, it's not intended for official policy type statements. And it's really not intended for controversial statements or anything like that. It's generally positive.
Define controversial.
It's
Well,
relative.
well, it's relative.
It is.
Well, it is.
It is.
It is. And if it's anywhere in the realm of controversial, proclamations aren't really the zone for that.
Well, it's
And-
next cultural, social, economic, intellectual, welfare of the community. So if we want to be inclusive, I think that pretty much defines the culture, social, economic, and intellectual are all in it.
But if it's controversial, if it's one of those things that's controversial, it's probably not appropriate for a proclamation. Because that proclamation is,
welfare for the community.
Define controversial, though.
Lawsuits.
I would define controversial if any one member of the board says they don't like it, then it's controversial.
Yeah,
And that's why I'm just trying to explain my reasoning, and and that's why I was encouraging by consent and effectively giving every board member a veto over any proclamation. Because if one board member says, I don't like this, then there's controversy. There's a dispute between two people about whether that item is acceptable for a proclamation. Now, controversial items can be raised as a resolution. I mean, a resolution is how the board can make an official statement of policy. It can be discussed. There's a public comment on it, discussion among the board, we give notice, and it's voted on. If there's an item that's controversial, but it's so important it needs to go through, well, that might be a process. A proclamation is generally a feel-good, I'd hate to say that, but it's kind of a feel-good, this is the, Public Works Day. We love Public Works Day, or week, or month, or whatever it is. In a lot of communities, it's for nonprofit events. It's for, Fort Collins has a local music month in April. It's not items of controversy. And so,
Fort Collins also does National Bible Week.
well, it's apparently not controversial. I mean, that one is.
Depends on the person that's perceiving it or receiving it, though.
And if it's going to be controversial and we're going to have a vote, then it needs to be discussed in an open meeting is the other thing. And so one of the suggestions at the last board meeting was to do proclamations by a super majority vote. So you could, would that be 5 members of the board? 5 out of 7 approve. Well, if you're going to take a vote like that, I think we need to do that in a public meeting. Now, all of a sudden, this proclamation, which is intended to just be happy public weeks, I mean, now it's a political event. The consent process is simply a yes, no. Any member can say it doesn't comply with these standards, and one of those standards that says it's controversial. And through that process, I think the proclamations that come out, yeah, are they going to be bland? Maybe. I mean, they're going to be proclamations that can get 7 members to agree. And if 7 members of this board can agree on a proclamation, I think by that, it's not controversial.
But at
But-
the same time, then you're forcing someone to either, I don't know. I think that's tricky ground because the way you look at it, I know that there was one person that was already against, say, Trustee Moyer's LGBTQ. It would have been a no and it would not have gone through.
Right.
So, I mean, we're talking about inclusivity and recognizing everyone. And we're saying that we all have our differences, but we all have to work together at the end of the day. So what we're doing is we're having a rubber stamp where one person says no, and you're erasing that person that was elected. There were a reason they were elected. You're erasing all those people's votes that voted for that person as well.
And that, and I mean, that's a fair statement. You look at it on the other hand of, and we went through this with the Bible Week one, is how can we do this without opening ourselves up for something that we may not be able to afford with legal battles or things of that nature, right? And so when we look at the whole welfare of the community, we have to look at, I think personally, beyond just these proclamations, but what they can lead to for the financial welfare of the community, that the taxpayers' dollars, of town staff time, if a case were to come down on anything. And so, should we stick to proclamations that are non-controversial to avoid that? For the betterment of the community in that sense. So it's which side, do you take of that scale? I don't know.
My position on this has always been that proclamations should be strictly within the purview of the mayor's office. And up until a few weeks ago, when we started these discussions, I think we've come up with some ideas here that are very much a nice compromise where, any member of the board can submit one of these and folks can look at that and basically give it a yay or an nay. I think that's a great compromise. And like I said, we do things as far as the consent agenda all the time, right? Where we have all of the members of the board basically in agreement on X issue. So I would say I very much like the language that you've come up with here. I think it very much fits the bill. And if something is, considered by any particular board member to be controversial, then we just don't have a proclamation for it. I don't think that's much of a. I guess I fail to see how that's much of an issue. Again, this used to be strictly in the purview of the mayor's office. So removing it from the mayor's office to something where we have, other board members be able to bring these forward. I think this is great. I think it's progress in that direction. So
Proclamations bring more people to our meetings than anything else. Hands down. And not only in a way to not to come complain about something, but to come celebrate. Football team, a ton of people came out for Pride. And a lot of people were really excited about it. This last one with pastors and stuff, I love seeing them there. And it was wonderful seeing the whole community together. I will take any excuse to party. I don't care what it is. I will be turned in my homework today. Great, let's have a party. Any excuse to celebrate is a good one because that brings community together. So if we are making it harder to do that, I think that's sad. I think there's so many different people to celebrate, and I just want to make a stance right now that celebrating a group of people or acknowledging a certain holiday or something is not anti another, right? So if I have opportunity to celebrate one group, I'm going to take it. If I have an opportunity to celebrate another group, I'm going to take it. And I'm going to be happy, and I'm going to stand, and I'm going to applaud all of them, not just some. that I personally agree with or politically agree with. I think that's junk that we do that. But that we make a political stand against things by our support for the proclamation personally. So I guess maybe this is a bigger discussion of whether or not, you know, as a board, we want to celebrate all facets of Wellington life. And if that's the case, then let's do it. Let's go all in. Let's celebrate all the things. There has to be, you know, legal limits or concerns. Our first responsibility is to keep our town safe, right? So if there's something that's absolutely not acceptable from a legal standpoint, we have to have that break that we can pull. But never once, if you guys come to this group and say, I would like to celebrate a group of people, I'll be like, nah, I don't like them. So you'll never get that from me. I just want to make sure that's very, very, very clear. So if we're over, yeah, we're just making it harder. So, but this shouldn't be used in some way as a weapon either. So I don't know how you legislate celebrations. And I think it's sad that people might want to use celebrations as a weapon. That's also scary. But the last thing we need to do is make it really complicated, or leave it up to one person to be a downer. I don't know if that's going to consistently be like the same person's like, nope, 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 I don't want to do that. But I don't know. I'll stand and support every single group that we come to celebrate. So
I have possibly a suggestion to kind of assist with how to protect ourselves, kind of like what we did, where there was a proclamation to be presented. There was some cautionary things shared via email on we need to watch this and this and this. And there was a process and procedure that was brought to us where us as trustees were able to see all of the proclamations that were coming forward. But it also should be something where you receive it as well, not like a day before it's supposed to happen, but receive it in advance just like we do. And we gave notice for anyone who wanted to have a proclamation done. There's a certain amount of notice, and if it's red flagged, then the town attorney can work with this person to make it to where it protects us as a community, but also still celebrates and recognizes the diversity of people that we have in the community. I think that to me is inclusivity, but also protecting us as a town. I don't want to limit anything that comes before our board that celebrates another group of people. So that's something I don't want to do. But if there's a way that we can legally protect ourselves while accepting these, I would like to do that as well.
I'd like to address a couple points. I think I was trying not to put myself in the middle of the process here, right? This is a board decision. So I appreciate the trust in, and not just me, the town, the position of town attorney, who may be. Appreciate that trust. Didn't write the town attorney into this process, but certainly would have a view on it. And I hate to say this is a policy written by attorneys for attorneys here, but yeah, that you've brought up some really important points, that proclamations are generally thought to be kind of a feel-good celebration. They are not a policy. They're not an official policy of the town. They're not legislative, or they're not an ordinance, but they do bring with it an incredible amount of opportunity for liability for the town. And so that's why we've turned partying into a bureaucratic process of how to approve it, because it needs to be. There is a lot of opportunity here for doing it wrong, which then you're going to turn feel good party time into a big cost to the town. And so that's why this was written. And I can maybe play with some other ideas. And like I said, I appreciate the trust. I mean, kind of evaluating how working with people to bring forward something positive. One of the opportunities to celebrate raised in my mind another concern that I've had here in like a super majority vote. So say, for instance, one member or two members of this board say no. For whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent, they say no. This isn't the message of the town. This isn't something I support. I'm concerned about inviting a group of people to this board to receive a proclamation and then having two members of the board go, I didn't support that, right? That's a downer. And so that's why it's a feel-good moment. It needs consensus. If it's a board proclamation. If it's a mayoral proclamation, and back to trustee or Mayor Pro Tem Mason's point, these previously have been mayoral, and in a lot of communities they are. And that's because the mayor has a certain role within the town. You know, it's a different position and a certain responsibility, and it's a mayoral proclamation. The mayor decides. That's it. There's no board. But if it's going to be a town proclamation by the Board of Trustees, I think it's an even bigger downer to bring a group here if one or two members of the board have already said, I don't support this. Well, and that's what I want, and that's why I think consensus is necessary. But to the point of, we don't want to dissuade party time, I agree, right? We want to the board wants to celebrate people, the town wants to celebrate. I think there needs to be a process for, and to Trustee Tietz's point, I think there should be a process for, if somebody requests, somebody red flags, if there's an issue, potential issue, to then work with the requester to try and come up with something that can get consensus. And if that needs to be, I mean,
I think
I'm not
that
any-
responsibility should lay on whoever is bringing it forward, so it doesn't tie up town staff or
Right.
whatever the case may be.
well, I mean, but one of the things here is this policy is not just a member of the board bringing something forward. This would also be a member of the community could request a proclamation, right?
Yeah.
And so who do they work with? That's,
One thing I do want to state is we should never be writing the proclamation.
that's in this policy. but
Yeah,
People
I
put it,
wanna make
no,
that
staff
really
isn't doing
clear.
that.
Yeah, we do not come with a proclamation and write it ourselves. That
Yes,
is.
I
that
thought
is to
we
be-
do come with a proclamation and write it.
in
Let me
this-
finish my thought though.
Okay.
Because I think that the consistency, the language, the way in which they're written, I think that's really important that it is done, by our staff, that we're not coming with cookie cutter kind of proclamations, that we're making it personal to Wellington and that we're creating them. So I don't think that, and I see that that's part, but I don't think that we should be writing word for word the proclamation. I think we should be coming with the concept, the theme, and then we should let that be done so very well.
I think I misunderstood you, because actually what I have
Yeah.
in the bylaws as written is the requester brings the language.
Mhm.
Town staff is
Yeah.
not being used, and that's one of my concerns.
I don't think
is
we
cost.
should use
No,
town
we
staff.
should not use
Okay.
town
I
staff.
think our proclamations will not be nearly as quality as they have been then, if that's the case.
And that's part of the review process is if the proclamation isn't written well, then that would be a reason for, under the proposal that I put in here, that would be a reason to say, no.
Bring back a better version.
It's, but writing a proclamation it takes time. And so we didn't want to use town resources for a proclamation that might not get approved even, especially, right?
Right.
And so we want to make sure that if somebody requests it, they come to the table with the when, the language, the person to contact, like, you need to bring a full package, and under what I have in the proposal here is staff's responsibility, and this would be Hannah's responsibility at this time, would be to look at that and go, I'm sorry, this isn't complete. Reject it. However, if it's complete, the approvals process begins. Like, staff wouldn't evaluate for content, only evaluate for, have you submitted everything you need to? But it is people, the proposal was to have whoever requests draft it, because otherwise it would take staff time to write.
I had
this.
a blast getting to do that with Trustee Moyer and Trustee Cannon. It actually was awesome. And I mean, it took us probably a week to get all of the fine details levered out, but having the multiple feedback helped me in ways that I didn't see. So I actually truly enjoyed getting that freedom to first come with one, Dan being like, oh, we need to stop. And then not giving up, but simply saying, let's see how we can fix this. So, and if that's the kind of message we're saying is, you know, this is not complete, please submit another blah, blah, blah. I think that's one, being extremely supportive to anyone who does send in that proclamation, but also increases the fact that now a community member has stepped forward, said they'd like something, and the door wasn't shut on their face. It's just, look, this is incorrect, work on it and bring it back. I think that, I mean, and should it be a big thing, these proclamations? No, but the people that bring them are big. So that's kind of my thing about it um, I don't think one single person should have veto power over, no offense to you, but over a proclamation that might mean more to a single group of people than it does to you, or to me. I don't, I think that I have a feeling you will draft something that has a process to support, but also legally protect. That's my generalized idea behind it, is I want to support anybody who brings forward a proclamation. I don't want to slam the door on them, but I do want to protect the town. And if there's a way, and you set a deadline of even a month, if this means this much to this person, they will give you a month's notice to submit, and they will tweak it until it's perfect for our community. And some people might not like the message it brings, but there is always a group of people that it does touch.
Yeah. If you don't mind, at the risk of making things controversial, because I think we need to consider all things here, right? And certainly not to, if there's any members of our community that happen to be a member of this organization, I think we need to throw out examples, right? If you wanted to have, if somebody came forward and said they want to have a proclamation for Satanic Church Day, how does that fit? Do we, I'm just throwing that out there because I can very much see this getting abused at some point, and I just want to make sure that we've got all our coverage, all our tracks covered. The fact that this was in the mayor's office prior gives him kind of the ultimate authority. Again, if we open this up to everyone, I just want to make sure that we know what we're getting into.
I'm going to give my little input. I'm pretty much in favor of what Mayor Pro Tem is saying, that it should come from the mayor. I think the proclamations have got kind of watered down over the period of time that I've been on the board here. But I like what you have said, Trustee Teets, and working with the town attorney, that, you know, they can bring that. I mean, nobody's going to be shut down immediately. I mean, if you bring in something that's just completely outrageous that you know it's going to make 90% of the town mad, they got the opportunity to work with people to hopefully get something through. And, you know, I think we need to be a little careful. And again, it should not be extremely controversial where everybody in the surrounding towns are going to think Wellington's one crazy place, you know, like you're talking about.
We're colorful.
Well, that's true. But again, this is going to give them the opportunity to work it just like you. I mean, when I saw the proclamation, I thought it was pretty watered down. I mean, I was hoping it was a little bit more direct, but that's where I'm coming from. But it was satisfactory to the other people where they could work through it. So I think the process we got right now will work. I think it should go through the mayor, but then coming out to us too. And again, you know, if it gets shot down one time, they could go back and rework it, rewrite it, whatever, and hopefully, you know, make it work best for the community. And that's the biggest thing, making it best for the community.
Well, again, I mean, that's why I very much like the language that you've brought forward. Because if a member decides that, well, okay, I don't agree with X thing or whatever, you have the opportunity to interact with that resident and see if you can make it right. But there needs to be, especially for this, there has got to be a point where I'm just telling you, this is going to get abused. I promise that, if we don't have some way to stop the vehicle type thing. So
I think us, I mean, after listening to Trustee Wiegand, taking it out of being like the preview of the mayor makes it to where it's gonna be very messy, very bureaucratic to get something to become a proclamation. It may be too open, and there's a reason why there's a mayor and the mayor gets elected and the mayor is the head of the board. So are we overcomplicating this when we really shouldn't be?
that's why I've always said, keep it in the mayor's office.
So, but you have to think here, it says proclamations will not be issued for matters of politics, religion, or individual conviction.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, that means Trustee Moyer's proclamation would not have come forward for LGBTQ.
Right.
And my proclamation would not have come forward for religious organizations,
Right.
which both had awesome turnouts.
They did.
It was a proclamation for faith-based
Yep,
organization.
right.
The proclamation.
So, but
right.
this removes all of that possibility.
Where is pride?
I don't see
It says
calls for-
proclamations will not be issued for.
falling for individual.
I can assure you, there is something that somebody could come up with that does not fit that definition, that would be not agreeable to the community. I can assure you of that.
Would it simplify things to go back to the mayor? Make them mayoral proclamations again?
I think we need Trustee Moyer and Trustee Cannon's feedback on this one.
If anything that we were agreeing to right now would say that we wouldn't do a proclamation for pride, that's wrong. So if that's how we're defining anything within here, because I read that and I didn't define it that way. So I would absolutely not be okay with
I
that.
think maybe she read it from that as individual conviction possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so
that's
it
not how
depends
I
on
would
the
define it.
interpretation of the
It
reader.
does.
And in this, that's all defined by, or that's all decided on by the boards and, or the board members in, when they're evaluating.
Yeah.
Yeah,
do-
I think this is worthy of having the whole board here for
Yeah.
further
Yeah.
discussion.
And my only statement is, the mayor is the mayor. So, I mean, he's the one who's going to get flack for it. He represents the entire town. I'm fine with going through mayor discretion. So, I mean, I can say happy pride all day long. If you weren't into it, I'd still do it in my board report. So,
And I think that's also like I mean, sure, there may not be a mayor up here that agrees with whatever,
Sure.
and that may be the case.
yeah, but never should we be doing a proclamation. Half the people are sitting there like this, like we have done in the past, and then the other people are celebrating it. That is horrible. So I don't want that to happen. So if we are bringing a proclamation, you haven't talked to the mayor and saying, I'm absolutely not okay with this, and you guys haven't worked that out, and you come and do that, that's irresponsible as a board member. So, but yeah, I think we're really overcomplicating this, and we're making it divisive, which is a celebration. So I think that's a shame, and I think we should really simplify it.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no way we should make a rule in which our bylaws say we're not celebrating pride. It's like that, if that was
I don't know
somewhere,
anybody
if that
making
would be
boy.
able to
No,
read it
not
like
a
that,
single
that would be
person.
not okay.
It was used as an example as individual convictions, and it specifically states proclamations will not be
Right.
issued for.
I get it. And I said, if we were to do that, that would be wrong. And
Yeah.
so that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't see that happening.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think one thing while we're on this, I think would be okay, we got it there. Never mind. I thought for some reason I didn't see it. But a time frame of when they want to submit it, so we have time.
Oh,
to
yeah,
work through it.
I have in here, I
That's
think,
there.
3 weeks, and that could always be changed
Yeah.
to further out, but part of that's depending on what the process is, right?
Yeah.
But I think it needs to be weeks out, not the week before.
For sure, for sure.
So, well, it sounds like more discussion here and more, I'll put some more thought into how this can be changed. This was a helpful conversation. I will be sending these bylaws out via email, and like I said, respond to me and say you got them, because I really want feedback. Want this is a document for the board, by the board. I wrote it, but we want everybody's agreement on all this. This is how you work together to do the business of the town. So I want as much feedback as possible, but I also don't want this process to drag on another
2 years?
2 years, right? I wasn't gonna say that, but yeah, I don't want this to drag on. I want to get this thing done. I am committed to getting it done, so I will send you emails, and please respond and let me know what you need. We'll get another meeting scheduled, and hopefully everybody can be here. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Regarding attendance, I wanted to kind of bring it back to the virtual attendance. I mean, I've used that and had to in the past. I'm curious if our attendance policy should include in person, because that's when we're our best. And then also, like work sessions virtually generally are more, they suck to do virtually.
Difficult,
If,
yeah.
if people are in person and you're the only one virtually at a work session, it's more work for everyone, and you really don't get the kind of participation you'd expect in a work session. So I'm just curious about, when you're looking through and giving feedback on attendance, what we should do to address a virtual attendance. I think it's a great option that we have. People are sick, whatever the case is, but not to be relied upon, or what our expectation is for people to be in person in meetings.
So somebody can't like attend all meetings virtually, basically.
Right, exactly. So it's better for the public if they were here.
It's better for us.
It's better for everyone. So that's always my preference, and I'm glad we have the option. I mean, like I said, I've used it before, and I've had to, and I've really appreciated that. I just want to
And
know.
that really didn't come about till COVID.
Right, never before that did we have any options. So I don't know.
do you have a suggestion for?
I just want everybody to start thinking about it, because we're best. Yeah, we're best in person. So when you're giving your feedback, maybe consider that.
I'll make sure in the notes, in the version that I send out, for further feedback that has notes and some comments in it I'll make sure to highlight that. And I think it's a very good point. It's something that's been discussed in the past, but I certainly don't have it in here. So I think
Yeah.
it's a great issue.
Okay, thanks.
So I'll make sure to
Virtual
highlight that.
attendance is in here.
Uh,
It's line 3.
But it's allowed, but the question is, how much virtual attendance should be allowed, I think. So 3 unexcused absences, but what if you have 3 unexcused absences, but 12 virtual attendances? So basically you're
Basically,
acting as a remote a trustee is the point. I think is the question that was raised there. It wasn't just simply, that wasn't discussed at the December meeting. It is identified in there, virtual attendance is allowed.
Mhm.
Yes. Does
there
the
a
board
limit?
want to put a limit on that? And that's,
like 6 per year on that, at least the
I
starting.
mean,
point.
so that'll be for the notes.
Yeah.
We can bring back for later
think about it.
discussion.
3 unexcused, 6 virtuals max.
Yeah, think about it, because that's something that could be easily,
Is that for
you know, you could
I
have
mean,
somebody who
you
doesn't
run
show up
into
at
this
all,
quite a bit,
and they're
but
just
that
always
is
online or whatever.
Workable.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I guess the goal is just that people want us to be here in person. We need to be
Right.
here in person, represent people. So, I mean, what is acceptable, what's not? Do we care? I don't know.
And-
That's just the question I'm bringing.
And all this would be doing at that point would be just bringing it up for conversation to be in front of the board at that point. It wouldn't be kicking you off or kicking
Right.
whoever off
Well, it
at
couldn't
that
do
point.
that.
No, no,
Yeah.
no.
No, it's just at that point, then we know we might have a problem.
Yeah, because we're
And that's
defining
where we
attendance, so
confront it.
Yeah.
might as well.
Yeah.
What are we
Right.
trying to do for our bylaws? Yeah.
That would at least give you a kind of a line.
sort of
Start working
the
on
board all agrees that X number of virtual attendances in a 12-month period is okay. More than that is
Is
not.
excessive.
Yeah, more than that is, right, yeah,
It is
something like that.
excessive. Use the
Okay.
exact same words.
I'll send an email out. I
Somebody
appreciate the
being-
conversation.
Thank you.
With somebody being in Florida all the time, you haven't done that, so.
Right? No, I try and schedule